Yes, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cannon Podcast. I am your boy at George V underscore AFC, and we have got an impromptu pod for you guys going today. I know we didn't have the transfer roundup able to happen, but we just recorded a breach as I scouted, so that will be out for your viewing pleasure very, very soon. And we thought, why not do an impromptu Q&A, a little bit of a description on Mr. Andrea Berta, and I'll be able to take some viewer questions and things like that. So I hope everybody is doing well. Everybody in the chat. It'll be a very relaxed kind of pod. We'll just talk a little bit, of course, about Madueke. We'll talk a little bit about Andrea Berta, things that we can maybe evaluate in the window, and where we feel that we're at as a team. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Oogie Boogie. Love you too. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. At the Physics Corner, thanks for coming on in. Sorry, just very impromptu pod. There's no real big reason for it. We kind of tried to replace the transfer pod for you guys, but we want to make sure that you guys are getting all of your content in, and we're not cheating you on any content. So very impromptu pod. Greetings to Matcha as well. And of course, don't worry about it. How you guys doing? Very, very nice to see you all. So guys, there is the youth pod is coming up. We're recording that on Monday, so do not worry. That will be something that we all will absolutely get into. And I can't wait to talk about the youth pod. But guys, first and foremost, I wanted to talk about, big Andrea Berta. There is kind of this whole thing that we're going to be discussing in terms of the window, and we'll maybe have a breakdown on what we would have been doing. Ironically, I definitely have a pod coming up in terms of reviewing some of the other transfers, and we're going to have a really special guest come for that. So that is absolutely on the horizon. So definitely coming in. Quickly from Oogie Boogie, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Impromptu, Madueke and Waneri signed. Yes, I mean, why don't we just start kind of there maybe, and we'll talk a little bit about the kind of Madueke of it all, and then we'll lead into Ethan, of course. Listen, Madueke is kind of one of those signings that I think is going to fall into like the if category, isn't it, for a lot of people, where if this was to work out, this would be a little bit more tolerable. If this was to happen, then I think I can understand the Madueke move a little bit more. And there's going to be a lot of concerns surrounding some of that. And I think for the most part, I can understand those fears. I'm kind of in a similar boat in which we're talking more about the type of the deal as opposed to maybe the talent. But, I would encourage everybody to check out the Scouted on Madueke, because I think that the talent itself, I'm very excited about. I do think that, the talent of Madueke is going to be something that we'll probably talk about a little bit more in pods going on, because we've kind of already talked about the deal and the overall impact of that. However, when you're looking at, Madueke just in general, I think one of my favorite things is one of the quotes that he actually took, where one of his favorite things to do is to stand up as fullback and go byline. That was one of the first things that he talked about in his player interview, which I thought perfectly describes some of the things that we're going to be talking about with Madueke in terms of some of the pros, in terms of some of the cons, kind of the care to which he takes his 1v1 separation is something that we're going to have to talk about, because I think the way that he preps a shot, the way that he preps kind of his 1v1 isolation, his separation is brilliant. And then some of those things in terms of the final action, some of those decision-making things are things that we probably want a little bit more care within. But one thing with Madueke is he's an incredibly coachable talent. I think when I look at some of his performances against PSV in particular, you're looking at a huge improvement from his out of possession work to what you've seen back then to now. And immediately you start to see every year he's slowly added a couple traits, which gets exciting from a talent who, by the way, is really young, only 23 years old as well. So this is a talent that you can grow with. Probably his biggest superpower that I've been really impressed with is how long his strides seem to be, not just in big spaces, which allow him to have like a really powerful carry and to have kind of endurance in the carry. So he's got, a brilliant ability to eat up ground, both short and long. But this is a guy that really, in a blink of an eye, can really close the distance, whether that's, out of possession, whether that's, in terms of an off the ball movement run. This is a guy that loves to attack space. And, that'll probably be a section of the pod a little bit later on when we talk about the collection of the signings in general, what we can expect, what we feel is really important. But All in all, I think that when you have a look at this type of talent, there are going to be some questions in terms of what it could be in the context of the window. I think it's the only deal where we're looking at it, and Arsenal seem to make sure to get this done as opposed to maybe getting potential value. £52 million. We're looking at a £48 million base fee, adding 4 million in add-ons for £52 million, which seems quite expensive for Madueke in terms of where he might be at. I think if I was going to be looking at a Madueke, I'd be looking at anywhere from £35 million. Um, and so I think when I have a look at some of these things, there's quite a bit of questions, valid questions. Of course, we don't know what the payment structure is, and but I do feel that it's very interesting that that's the only deal that so far to date hasn't been value per se. I mean, Kepa, you could look at it with a release clause of £5 million, brilliant deal in terms of a backup, in terms of basically signing Bournemouth's number one goalkeeper for £5 million. You can't go wrong with something like that. Then we might dig into kind of the other deals, the Norgard deal, £10 million with £2 million in add-ons. That's a brilliant fee again for value. Then we're discussing, Christian Mosquera, who again for rumored fees. I mean, we haven't had it confirmed entirely, but we're looking at £16 million. I mean, guys, like we're talking about some serious value in the deals there. And then, of course, we're looking at Victor Gyökeres, who, if we're going to take reports as is, you're looking at something along the lines of £54.5 million base, plus add-ons that take us to roughly 64 to 69 million pounds all in. So when we're talking about the window, I'm quite confused with the idea that Madueke is potentially the only one that we're looking at that's not value, quote end quote. And it does fall into one of those deals where if you're Andrea Berta, he has done a lot of business, guys, a lot of business. And we'll definitely be talking a little bit about maybe some of the plan. But I did want to highlight the Andrea Berta factor here and see what people thought. And, when you have a look at the total business, guys, let's have a review of everything. So we're looking at, as I said, Gyökeres seems to be close. You've sealed Martin Zubamendi for £55 million. You've got Nani Madueke for £52 million. Christian Mosquera, Christian Norgard for £12 million. Kepa for £5 million of a release clause. And they're looking to tie up the business with potentially a Briche Eze, and as well as links to Xavi Simons. Now, for me, guys, we're looking at an incredible amount of business. Let's add the Gabriel extension. Let's add, of course, Miles Lewis Skelly's contract extension and Ethan Waneri, who was also confirmed to have been signed, as Oogie Boogie says. That is a lot of business. I mean, you're talking absolutely right now 6 different kind of signings if we're going to include Victor Gyökeres in. And we're talking 3 contract extensions, as well as looking at another, and we haven't even got into any sales yet. So when I have a look at the business and the total number of transactions, guys, 3 contract extensions, 6 players, 5 done, 1 virtually done, and we're looking for another, you're looking at 10 total transactions. And that doesn't even include any potential other contract extensions or sales that we're looking at, all on July 18th. So, I'd love to know what people think in the comments about, the impact of Andrea Berta. I'd love to talk about that for a little bit, and how I feel maybe that could impact some of the things that we're seeing in this window. I mean, the whole idea of the Andrea Berta and some of the stories that we've talked about, in which apparently there was previous interest with Nani Madueke, in previous seasons, and then now Mikel, who has been a previous fan, has suddenly got into it. I probably underestimated, and I was already somebody that was very high on an Andrea Berta. I probably even underestimated his total impact and his impact on proceedings. I mean, I think it's all been well articulated how Andrea Berta was absolutely somebody who was a big fan of Victor Gyökeres and getting him in. But I think that the way that we've done our business, Mosquera has been somebody that he's really highlighted even in his time at Atletico Madrid. It's somebody that he's believed in. That seems to be a really highly sought after talent that he's been able to sort. I mean, the entire Christian Norgard signing, I mean, that's Brentford's captain in a window that Brentford have just demanded £71 million from Manchester United. for their star signing, and we were able to get their captain for only 12 million pounds, 10 up front. It's gorgeous business. It's really is what it is. And I think Oloshola Toba, thank you so much for your super chat. Credit to Andrea Berta for doing 70% of our transfer business before preseason. I really agree with some of these sentiments. I mean, I think there is no debate how I had certain preferences going into the window. However, to get this amount of business done and done up front, it is incredible. It is absolutely something to be praised for. And I do actually think that this Andrea Berta impact has actually given Arsenal and, the kind of backroom staff something to think about, right? I don't know if Mikel has had the power, so to speak. I really do feel that there's been a real good dialogue between the two. And there is somebody that is there to question Mikel, which ultimately, guys, I think is a good thing. I think anytime that you've got kind of this one person who knows all is going to be something that you can't question. I mean, you look at Klopp, he had Michael Edwards. That's a successful partnership. You look at Arsene Wenger, David Dean, having somebody that you respect in the room with you that's able to question your ideas is, something that I believe is going to be a phenomenal addition to the backroom staff. I really think that it's had an impact in terms of the way that we've done business. I look at, the speed to which we've been able to wrap up so many different deals and, the speed to which we've been able to be very flexible in our deals. The Madueke signing has also recently come out that we've used a super agent, Ali Barat, who, again, just speaks to Berta's willingness to handle negotiations uniquely, handle negotiations on an individual basis. Madueke may have needed a certain agent to get things over the line, whereas his dealings with Mascara shows that he's able to highlight value, extract value, and squeeze Valencia, despite getting a higher price bid from somebody else, into a very cheap deal. And then we're looking at Brentford, who, again, they're not easy negotiators. We just saw Mbeumo move for 71 million pounds off to United to only get him for 10 plus 2. I think that people are really underselling the impact that it took to have such an experienced sporting director. And this is all to say that it's brilliant. And I'm really happy that, Danny brings this up, because this is where I'm kind of leaning into the Berta conversation of it all. Let's see how he does in selling, because I really do agree with this in terms of understanding how can we recruit some value. And I think when you broadly look at the sales, if we can have a conversation about it, I don't know if we're actually going to get major selling numbers here. I think like the largest we could expect is potentially from a Kivior, but other than that, you're looking at fairly fringe players who could be on high wages. I'm more looking if he can get the fringe done, set the team up in a way that there are no holes going into next season, but additionally, we're making sure to trim the fat of players that we really don't need. And I think that getting those deals done for the difficult sells is really more important to me than extracting major value in your first window that you've already completed 10 transactions. And so I think that when you have a look at some of those things, it's also about being realistic. For example, Zinchenko, in the last year of contract, looking at what, 120, 150K a week in salary? Are we looking for major value there? I'm not sure. Reece Nelson, one that I think you could expect some decent value for moves within the Premier League, but you're also looking at somebody on 100K a week. And so there are certain deals that you're looking at, like those two, that I would say, okay, I'm not looking for massive numbers when I'm looking at a sale, but I'm looking for efficient sales. I'm looking for you to really get those wages off the wage bill so that we can start to trim the areas of the wage bill we don't need. But then you start to talk about some of the other signings that we're looking at. You look at your Lukungas, who's in the last year of his contract. What can we do there? In 6 months, he's able to sign for free with external players and external foreign clubs. So what are we able to work in that kind of a sale? You're looking at Karl Hein, who we sent out on loan, had a very decent time. But again, looking at Sevilla, and these clubs that may not have massive amounts of value, but you're looking more, in my opinion, at your Trossard and your Kivior. Those are two kind of, sales that I would say I would really like to judge Andrea Berta in terms of what he's able to do. Trossard, despite being an older player, is someone with immense value in the market, at least on a fairly low wage of 90K a week. So you're looking at a player, if we do want to move on, that should be something that we're getting at least 20 million pounds for. Then you start to look at, your Kivior, if that's something about us looking to sell. And if you do sell, minimum 25 million pounds or more, I mean, you're looking at a valued player who has done really, really well. Those are the things that I think we need an Andrea Berta for in terms of decisiveness, right? And I think that, when we start to look at the window, that is something that I'm really happy about, because there is a certain decisiveness, despite rumors of stories. And, Andrea Berta loves to use the media. There absolutely was a clinical edge if you start to step back and see, the degree to which we've been able to secure signings so quickly before us flying out to the Asia Tour as well. There's absolutely decisiveness in the way that we've managed to move for certain targets. And despite us planting stories that I think we've been able to play clubs off each other, it seems like Andrea Berta and the club know what they're doing, as opposed to there being this panic within us as Arsenal fans trying to demand things to get done. And, it seems like that we've been able to do that, so to speak. I do think that the window is incomplete. And I think when you start to have a look at, what could come in, it's a brilliant thing so far, but there is a certain level of an Eberechi Eze or another type of target that I'm looking to really make sure that this window can go from decent to very, very good. And then we'll see whether or not these sales can even upgrade that a little bit further. So those are things that I'm looking for with Andrea Berta. Of course, very happy with securing Ethan Nwaneri, who I think is a brilliant contract. Let's talk a little bit about that. And guys, I see all of your questions, by the way. Thank you so much. We're going to have to scroll up and go through them. I am going to leave almost 45 minutes for questions, so do not worry. I'm going to waffle a little bit for Ethan, and then I'm just going to go straight to your questions. So guys, thank you so much again for everything here. And I may have to ask you guys to do your questions again, because you guys have been brilliant. You've been throwing it all in the chat, which is amazing. But I'm just going to try to go through them as much as I can. So number one, Ethan Nwaneri. This is a huge, huge contract to get done. Never in doubt, by the way, from my perspective. But in terms of making sure that Arsenal are retaining their top elite talent, it represents everything that I think is very important with the club right now, where we have seen examples of the club move clinically to support our star players. I think Nani Madueke and Mascara are deals that we have chosen to show Bukayo Saka and William Saliba, who, by the way, we really need to sign these new contracts. We are investing in you both. These signings more to me speak as though we are doing everything in our power to make sure that you guys aren't overburdened again. And I'm really happy with that approach to the window. And I think it's been an underrated aspect of the window as well. Then when we move on to kind of the Ethan of it all, understanding that Miles has signed that amazing contract earlier, and now we've got two Hale End players, along with a certain Max Dowman that's potentially on the tour, along with Marley Salmon and some of these other Hale End players. Keeping 3 to 4 people from Hale End as part of the major playing squad is massive, but I would love for everybody just to think about this for a second. Have a look at Arsenal's midfield rebuild that I think has gone very under the radar. And if we're looking at, Ethan being primarily used in a more central role, which is reported by David Ornstein, we're looking at Martin Odegaard. We're looking at potentially bringing Eberechi Eze in. That's 3 really major, horrific aspects of, of an attacking midfielder and variation to that. Then we're stepping back a little bit and we're looking at what could Mikel Merino be, Declan Rice in left 8, and potentially Miles Lewis-Skelly there. Now we're looking, in deep midfield, and we're looking at potentially Zubamendi, Christian Norgard. I would love to target a little bit of a youth name for everybody to have a look at, Eve Ibrahim, who had undergone a brilliant growth spurt, and we'll talk a little bit more about him in the youth pod. But there, for example, you've got 3 players per position with some really distinct profiles that make the team unique and flexible and different depending on the opponent. And one thing that I have a challenge for Mikel Arteta going into this season, I really feel when you start to take a step back, guys, we can kind of start to demand a little bit more of Mikel in terms of his management of the squad, in terms of management of players, and being able to sit there and start to play towards opposition more. And with this team, with a squad like this, not that those demands weren't there, but there is a lot more pressure now that you have the options to use the options that you have. So I think that's a really fair expectation for us moving forward in preseason. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the main pod, about maybe some certain tactics I'd like to see. But I do think that Mikel and his use of the squad is going to come into question. And that includes Ethan, by the way. That really includes Ethan. It includes Max. I know Evan Ab, you talked about will he get a bench on this season? I don't know if we'll see that in the Premier League. I completely expect him to have a debut season, though, and he will be used. He will have his debut. And this is a talent that I think is really exciting. Really exciting. It's a very unique talent. These are the exceptional talents just in general. But broadly speaking, we're looking at a very big midfield rebuild that has gone on, which is surprising to me. I kind of felt like we were looking towards more of an attacking rebuild, but I haven't really seen it talked about quite a bit on X or on our social media platforms. And I think that it is worth saying Arsenal have done a very sly midfield rebuild that actually kind of seems quite ironic because you're looking at Liverpool, who did a really big move in Florian Wirtz, Manchester City, looking at Ryan Cherki, Raniers, Rodri. That's a change in their midfield. And I think that Arsenal have responded differently, but they have responded. And I think that all title winning or potential title winning teams have chosen to really address central carrying and running through the middle of the park, all of them to a certain extent. And that's really interesting to see. So we'll talk a little bit about the differences between teams. But I definitely wanted to make this a little bit more of a Q&A for all of you guys. So that's enough of me and my waffle session. So I definitely had some questions. So I wanted to take some questions from the Discord that we received. And again, guys, you can become a Discord member by just clicking in the link down below in terms of becoming a member on our Patreon for a 7-day free trial. If you guys really like the content, A, thank you so much. And then B, we've got a lot of stuff coming up. So make sure that you guys are following and we will absolutely be able to talk a little bit. And guys, for all the Xavi Simons comments, trust me, I see them. I will want to hold off a little bit. We're going to be doing a Xavi Simons Scouted next week for your viewing pleasure. So don't worry, that will be coming as well. But number one, I wanted to take some questions, as I said. So from X, firstly, I will take from George Dave. Do you think there's actual interest in Xavi, or do you think it's leverage to get Sporting to negotiate below the release clause for Eze since we'll have 1 year left next summer? Very suspect that Fab said we're now interested in not advancing now instead of June. I believe personally that when you start to talk about the Xavi Simons interest and how it's been reported and the likelihood of it, fundamentally, you're looking at an Andrea Berta kind of masterclass. This is a guy that I do believe tells everybody that they are beautiful. This is a guy that works the room. He's the guy at the end of the night that, is talking to the girl at the bar, talking to the girl who's going out for a smoke. And he's making sure that he's keeping all of them sweet, all of his honeys sweet, and all of them in order. And then he's going to decide at the end of the night who he wants to go home with. And, there is a danger with that. If the girls see you, there is an issue there and you may not be successful on that night. But I do feel that we're looking at a person who makes sure that negotiations get to a point where both players say yes. And it's up to Arsenal to decide kind of where you would like to go. And, this is an interesting tactic. I don't know if it's, necessarily something that we could have seen from Edu, so to speak. But I do think this comes from a serial dater, so to speak, an experienced dater, and it's somebody that's clearly confident in his ability to, as the young kids say, riz his potential targets into doing it. So I think Andrea Berta is somebody that's absolutely on course to basically make sure that everybody, we won't be left with kind of a Raheem Sterling kind of window. That is one of the benefits, I think, in operating under an Andrea Berta kind of mentality. So I think that's brilliant news from an Arsenal perspective, because we're looking at getting players in and being decisive no matter what. And that's not something that you can say that Arsenal were always really great at. So that's a brilliant thing for me. Going up to our Discord again, sorry guys. And make sure, guys, if you guys do have questions, just put the little Q so I can know. I know there was a bunch of questions earlier on. It's just you guys are just so brilliant in terms of all the engagement. So I may not have seen all of them. So if you could just put Q semicolon and then your question, and I'll try to get through them. So this came from Sturm Tigru Pew Pew on the Discord. So thank you so much for your question. The signings made this summer in terms of Kepa, Mascara, Norgard, Gyökeres all seem that they're signings that Berta wanted as opposed to signings that Arteta wanted. They seem to be more cheap and smart buys, something he was absolutely in charge of at Atletico. Do I think that the appointment of Berta has increased the amount of power Arteta has at the club? And how does it affect the way we look at the market in the future? And then lastly, he does say, so there's 3 questions there. Can we expect any changes in terms of youth recruitment? I'll answer the youth one really, really quickly. Youth recruitment, I don't think Andrea Berta is going to be involved. That's completely per Mertesacker's wheelhouse. And in terms of him being able to recruit Will Wright, I think is phenomenal. But unfortunately, I will elect to talk a little bit more about that on the youth pod because this is a little bit more of an Andrea Berta aspect. I think that Berta could be used to start getting, talents that we see for the first team. But I truly feel that Per Mertesacker is going to be leading that along with James Ellis and a lot of kind of the other youth scouts that we have. So from a youth perspective, we're not looking at talents for me that are going to supply the Hale End academies. But, if you're looking at somebody like an Ayub Buadi, by the way, is a youth talent, but is someone clearly playing first team football and a very elite talent, you could be looking at Berta, who could help you in securing those types of talents, especially if you're fighting the Real Madrids, the Bayerns, and the Chelseas and the cities of this window when you're looking at trying to recruit those top first team talents. I think Andrea Berta helps you there. He's very unique in being able to be flexible to negotiations. So, in that sense, he can help with youth, but I don't think he'll be helping too much with the academy. We did kind of touch on this in the previous live about the Berta impact, and I will reiterate, I personally feel that this recruitment of Andrea Berta is phenomenal in terms of the future of Arsenal Football Club and not making Mikel have too much power. I think that when you have somebody that is able to challenge you, it's a good thing. It's actually a brilliant thing. You need it. No matter how incredible you might be at your job, you need to have people that respect to make you force to think a little bit outside the box. Otherwise, you might feel that only your way is the successful way. And then when you're not open to different methods of winning, of succeeding, you pigeonhole yourself, you become predictable, and you ultimately stay stagnant. So from my perspective, I think that absolutely Andrea Berta, I wouldn't say has taken away the power, but has taken away how much power Mikel might have. And that's ultimately, for me, a great thing, because I think anybody that has too much power, it leaves you at risk of being blind to success in other ways. So that's, I think, ultimately a really good thing with Andrea Berta. And then I think, secondly, does it affect the way we might look at the market in the future? Guys, I think the biggest thing that we need to look at is not responding to links in the way that we have as Arsenal fans. We've gone from an Edu style who gave no links and who, potentially only targeted one target, to another sporting director who is legitimately, like I said, balancing the girl at the bar, balancing the girl who's off taking a smoke, balancing a girl who's chatting up with your friend. This is a guy who is working the room. So in terms of us and our ability to kind of stay calm in terms of links, in terms of updates, I really feel that we need to kind of temper our expectations of how serious every single journalistic story could be. It doesn't matter who you might have as a preference. I would say that's just the big thing to really look out for from an Andrea Berta aspect, where probably looking at a pattern and you're looking to see whether or not, it's a player that maybe Berta wants to negotiate for. But really, if you're trying to see who he wants to actually sign, that's going to be completely subjective. And I think it's kind of useless almost using links as a justification for priority or targets or things of that nature. So that's kind of my take on the entire Andrea Berta of it all. So I'll take one of you guys' questions from YouTube. Thank you so much. So the Physics Frontier, do you think that Rodrigo is still possible in the window, or does Eze seem more likely considering that Palace are in the Conference League right now? Okay, so with the Rodrigo, look, I think that both Rodrigo and Eze are both possible, but I don't think you get both at the same time, if that makes sense. I think we have one major signing left, roughly £70 million. And it's a matter about whether or not, kind of Mikel wants one or the other, and they're very different in mentality. Like, I think when you look at a Rodrigo, you are absolutely having some questions with Martinelli in 2026, right? You're having a question about whether or not this kind of left wing who prefers to be a little bit more of a second striker having impact, in terms of close combination play, but especially in the box as more of a second striker. That ideally is kind of the spaces that you would like to have Martinelli be in. And so that's going to be a question there. Eberechi Eze asked a little bit more questions of Martin Odegaard in terms of, he has an ability to play on the left, completely replaces the Trossard profile of the left, gives you a more creative passer on the left. But again, like Rodrigo, but in a very different way, we'll need a dynamic overlap to push him inside. But you're looking at, Eberechi Eze being a little bit more of that final third playmaker. And so, you're asking questions of potentially Martin Odegaard in 2026 a little bit more with that type of signing. You're also asking, does Calafiori, by the way, guys, become one of the biggest winners of this window, whether you're talking about Rodrigo and Eberechi Eze? I think he does. You're talking about, a really forgotten talent who, for me, has had, tons of injuries, but is one of the few dynamic options on the left that we already have, that we know can push players inside. And so regardless of the two, I think that he becomes really, really quite important. And I do agree with Ali really quickly that he has been written off by a lot of fans, and I'm not too sure why. I know it's a little bit of PTSD from injury, but the talent there is phenomenal. But I think from my perspective, whether it's Rodrigo or Eze, I think you don't lose. Those are brilliant players. I have a preference to an Eberechi Eze currently, especially with the dynamics of the squad in terms of what I feel that we might need. But I think Rodrigo's talent, if you were to platform him, he absolutely gives you more individual moments. And I think that Eberechi Eze could solve many areas of our squad a little bit more than a Rodrigo. But Rodrigo has the talent, if platformed, to be more of an X factor talent. So it kind of depends where you want to go, right? And it kind of depends on how you want to orient the team a little bit. But I lean towards Eze because I think that he gives us a little bit more in terms of fixing some of the squads. So yeah, that's kind of my take a little bit on the Rodrigo aspect of it all. Alan, thank you. I am slowly screaming in my chest about going live. It definitely carries a lot of anxiety for me, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the kind praise. So we'll go off to another question from Matcha. Do you still think Hato is possible? I think that Hato is one of those signings that needs two sales. If I just got a Zinchenko, it would be difficult for me to see him come in. I do think that Zinchenko and Jakub Kiwior have to be, the choices for a Hato to even open up. And even then, guys, like this is quite a bit of business. You know what I mean? Like, we're looking at somebody that's already going to have minimum 6 signings in. Then one of Rodrigo and Eze is 7. Then we're talking about 8, and we have already done 3 contract extensions. We haven't even started with any of the sales yet. So I think just to be comfortable within the squad, yes, I think it's possible if those 2 sales go. Do I have the sporting director that's going to give me all those things? Maybe. Who knows? It's a lot to manage. But I do maintain, I think that that's a very logical plan. If I was going to be looking forward to kind of making sure that I have enough assets in certain areas and I'm not over bloating the squad. But I don't know if I'm doing that ahead of, my Rodrigo as a decision. So yeah, that's kind of my take on those things. So quick question from Harry Nigeno. George, with regards to players' salaries, what are your thoughts on reports from Portugal stating that Gyökeres' contract is 8 million euros net? I think that's a lot of money. I think that he was never going to come cheap. But I also don't think Sesko was going to come cheap, or any striker that we were going to be targeting was to come cheap. Like, I think at minimum you were looking at 200 K a week, pounds minimum, reaching up to 250. I mean, horses for courses there. Like, I think you were looking at a high salary regardless. And I'm not too worried about that. I think I'm more worried about some of the other wages on the wage bill. I mean, we've got Havertz coming up to 2 years left on his contract next summer, already on something like 295K a week. That's a lot of wages. Are we committing more to that? That's a big question. Looking at some other people, Jesus, 265K a week, who we don't feel it has much of a future within the team, has really been hampered with injuries. Like, I look at some of those wages in attack as something that we could clean up a little bit more. Of course, Reese Nelson, like that's an easy wage to get rid of, 100K a week, but nonetheless a high wage. So as far as salaries go, generally what my opinion on them is that I feel that anytime that you go above 250K a week, I look towards that being more of a starter. And if you're not a starter, I think that's poor wage allocation. If you're under 250K a week, I can start to rationalize some things, especially in this market and in this age. But I do think that when you're above it, it should scream guaranteed starter. And if it doesn't for your player, and if you don't perform to that way, then I start to question whether or not those are good wages spent. So that's kind of my idea about salaries just in general. But thank you for the question. Um, from Ali, which striker other than Watkins and Sesko would you go for? Um, I don't know. I feel kind of uncomfortable talking a little bit about that because I feel like we've made that decision. I don't know whether or not another striker is kind of the question, really, that we is something that I would go for personally. I mean, there's tons of options. I think that Hugo Ekitike, even though he's more likely to go to Liverpool, if you like more of that deep, complete nine that likes to come to in midfield, interact a little bit, be able to pin players, and also have the strength and the endurance to run beyond as well. Like, you're going to be looking at a Hugo Ekitike who's very exciting. I think Ollie Watkins represents brilliant value within the league that we know, and he represents an option. Sesko, like we've talked about, represents an option in a different type of striker, a little bit more channel running. Another striker. That Sami Ajahoa, who I've liked at Porto, definitely somebody that I think is a little bit more in that bully nine kind of mentality, very similar to like a Diego Costa. But again, prospect. I think your Seskos, your Ekitikes, your Ajahoas, they're all kind of these prospect nines. And I think Ollie Watkins is really the only nine right now that I look at that's maybe in that more win now category. And then we've got Gyökeres, who looks to be done. So I'm not too sure personally if I'm looking at a nine as like the vital thing that I would go for. I mean, it really seems like for me, Gyökeres is in, and then right now it looks like the attacking midfield, position is something that the club want to do. I do think if we complete, whether it's Rodrigo or whether it's Eze, either, they're both players that for me are best in central areas, and I would love 2026 to begin to find a really superstar signing that I will begin to push. It's the Bradley Barcola agenda. That is going to be my entire focus for the next year in trying to manifest great Arsenal to become French again. And that's going to be the player that I'm currently in love with, and that's kind of something that I'd be looking towards more in 2026. But yeah, that's, hopefully I've answered your question in terms of the striker. Thank you so much. Really quickly from Simon, thanks on the new job, George. Thank you. I really appreciate it. How many goals do you reckon we'll score in the league this year? I would love to park that question, and we will, in terms of next kind of pod when we talk about the end of the window. We're going to be doing all the goals conceded, most valuable signing, underrated signing. We're going to do all of those awards kind of just at the end of the window. It's tough for me to say how many goals I'll reckon when we don't even have like the main goal scorer in completely. So I would like to just try to delay that a bit, but I will answer that question at some point. From Frosty BD, good job doing this solo. Thank you. I am very, very stressed. I don't love going solo. I normally have Alex to help me. So I really appreciate that. And then, how do you see us lining up next year, and anyone from the academy to keep your eye on bar Max Dowman? Okay, so next year, and we're going to be talking about this actually on the main pod a little bit, in terms of some of the iterations, but I would love for people to start seeing Arsenal in a little bit more of a 4-2-4 and a 3-4-3 kind of signing. This idea that, this left back could transition to join the diamond and make this 3-4-3 is something that I think Arsenal will primarily operate under. And then, of course, I think that we're going to have a ton of different lineups for kind of the opposition at this point. And I think that Zubimendi changes quite a bit in terms of our ability to operate in different midfield configurations. It gives us a certain flexibility that I don't think that we had last year. And I also think when you have so many signings, right? I do believe that with all those signings, you must see different iterations within our forward line. Guys, I think one thing that we're talking about, if you want to look at the academy, I think Max Dowman's brilliant. Marley Salmon is a central center back and a right center back you must keep your eye on. I'm so surprised that he hasn't gotten the clamor yet. Again, he's similar in age to Max Dowman. And he is somebody that I just think is going to take this club by storm and be probably the first center back that we've produced. So I really would look out for him. In terms of some other, players that maybe you might not have heard of, Louis Zekovic-John is somebody that I really rate. I think he's going to be phenomenal in the U21s. Incredible, frightening pace and an ability to really impact games and kind of that game-breaking quality with electric pace. So that is something that for me, I would have a look at. Trying to think of some other youth players to keep an eye on. I think Kieran Thompson is going to be somebody that we bought last year. That's going to be a phenomenal player. That's already been, talked about in terms of playing kind of in the U21s, for sure in the U18s. So that's another name that I would really believe in. And there's tons of others, but again, I probably would encourage us. We're going to have an entire youth pod that we will get in the nitty gritty of it with Will Balsam. So definitely look out for that. We're going to be recording on Monday, so it'll be sometime next week. But those are some names just to keep you a little bit excited. Also, by the way, Will Wright, who we just signed from Salford, looks to be an incredible talent. 6'3", going to have some, brilliant competition with Andrea Berta, who's also gone on preseason tour, which is phenomenal. I think that Will Wright's a very interesting player. Really strikes me similar to Evan Ferguson in some of the few games that I've been able to catch recently, and I'm really excited. Was able to talk with a brilliant fan and analyst from Salford recently, and he was talking about how much they believe in the talent. And he's 6'3", 17 years old, and already looks to be a very competent ball striker, but somebody that also is in that mold that likes to drop off deep and incredibly creative. So it's an incredible signing in my opinion, and kind of goes away to the whole youth recruitment drive that people like to critique on X. I really think it's a little bit outdated, to be honest with you. So really happy to see that signing. And yes, I am doing a live session. Nice to see you, Chris. Absolutely. I wouldn't have imagined to be doing a live session at all. So yes, I will probably take some questions from Discord. We took a bunch from YouTube, so I really appreciate guys all the questions. You guys have kept them coming in all live, so I really, really appreciate it. This is from Dinny on the Discord. Does the signing of Berta in his current business suggest a change in strategy or philosophy in this phase of the club? And is it one you welcome or aren't too keen on? I think that's a really good question. When I look at whether or not it's something I agree in, I love how decisive Berta is. That is something that I completely align with. I think that far too much, if anything, Arsenal are the people that talk about what they're going to do more than they actually do it in the past. This is the friend that is telling you he's going to go on a diet. And he hasn't, and he's gonna go get Chipotle. This is the friend that's going to talk about, yeah, bro, like I'm gonna be getting that job in the future, absolutely. And you start to check in, and he hasn't even had work interviews yet. Arsenal are notorious for talking about what they're gonna do instead of actually doing it. And so, from that perspective, Berta is a doer, and I love that. The only thing that I do feel right now, and I'm not too sure on, and I think we need more sample. I mean, it is his first window, is categorically doing this kind of method with more super agents, with having a little bit more involvement. It can be a great thing when you have a cooperative team. However, it can also be difficult when you've got a really tough personality. And if they do end up clashing, the fights end up huge. Anybody that knows, if you've got a partner who's a type A personality as well, sometimes it can be fire and ice in a sense. And so it's really about making sure that we've got some open and honest communication, and that we all have a process that everyone feels heard. That that I think is something that I was really adamant on recruiting. And so I want to talk about the pros and cons there, right? Because it is understandably a concern, but also praise. Like, you don't want one person to have all of the control. It would be ridiculous to assume that, Berta or Mikel, by the way, should have all this control. I mean, nobody would want that. And so I love having a voice that can compete with him, but if that voice becomes combative to the point that you don't get anything done, then that's a problem, right? So it's just about making sure that we have those conversations and are open and honest about it. So yeah, I that's what I would feel. In terms of another question from the Discord from Ed, did Berta make any enemies over his time at Atletico Madrid? Any clubs were soft cut off from? I don't know about enemies. I mean, I'm sure. Look, it's difficult for me to say. I'm not in the room with them, so I do think that whenever you have a strong personality, it's fully possible that business, you end up doing it with people that but also could rub people the wrong way. But I think it's really difficult for me to answer that question, unfortunately. Sorry, Ed. Like, I don't know. I'm not in the room with him, and so we haven't really heard Andrea Berta talk much. So I feel like I'd be disingenuously projecting what I feel he could be or what he's doing. So sorry, I just don't know if I can answer that question. And then lastly, from Callum on the Discord, Callum 1903, as of now, based on what we've already done in the market, what would complete our window? Just an Eze type player or more if possible? Oh, and are you excited about Madueke as I am? I'm definitely excited about the talent of Madueke. I do think that, you might be a little bit alone or on your ones a little bit for some of the rest of the Arsenal fans. But yes, Callum, I'm excited about that. And then in terms of completing the window, look, guys, I think that there's more holes. I do not want to run away from this, because I've always felt personally, and not everyone on the Cannon podcast has agreed with me. Rohan and Alex, I think, are a little bit more understanding that things can be done differently in the forward department. But I have to hold my hands up, guys, and say personally, George wise, I wanted at least 2 starting level upgrades in the front line, at the very least. I'm unsure if Gyökeres is one of those, and I would represent Rodrigo and Eze to be one of those. And I think that's what I wanted to walk out of the forward window with, and I absolutely wanted 3 forwards. One thing that I really did want to talk about that I'm happy with, even if I haven't got my specific preferences, like they weren't my first choice walking in the window. But one thing that I love between the Gyökeres, the Madueke, and any one of Eze or Rodrigo, all of them carry this, by the way. They have a relentless attitude to attack space, and they are all incredibly powerful carriers that still have the endurance after a really long sprint of over 20 yards to have a very powerful shot. Guys, I think that's vital to addressing some of our transitional issues that we've had in the past. So when I have a look at, have we recruited the traits that I wanted? Undoubtedly. I think we've got people that are attacking space, relentless about it, huge speed, and have this ability to, yes, have a very strong shot, despite having a long carry, which, by the way, I don't know if we've got in the team, period. I mean, I think Saka has it in moments, but it's a little inconsistent in terms of that, especially after a long carry. And it's not a trait that I think was rife within the squad. So I'm really happy that all of those targets are kind of with that in mind. That's kind of the something, if I'm trying to understand what Arsenal have done from a coaching perspective, those are the 2 major traits that I think that we've really isolated to make sure that we can complete at the end of the window. So I'm really happy about that. But in terms of trying to finish, again, we got to get that third attacker in. Undoubtedly, I don't think our business looks good unless we've got a third attacker, and I'll go that hard. I would look at, even if Gyökeres is done, with Madueke, with Norgard, with Mascara, with Zubimendi, with Kepa, I see that those 6 players as an incomplete window right now. It absolutely needs the third attacking signing for me to say we're starting to look very good. There's other holes that I would look for, by the way. Again, I'm not 100% confident that we've recruited that second starting 11 attacker, but I'm willing to wait and see. But that could be something in 2026 that we really evaluate, especially when we've got Jesus off the wage bill. So that becomes a little bit easier. Um, However, I do think, yes, the overlapping left back is something that we do need. I mean, we really don't have that profile. I mean, the Ben White timber flexibility that we've got on the right is spoiled for choice. Whereas at left back, I feel like we do lack that true dynamism. I think Calafiori can do that, absolutely. And he'll do that next season. I just don't trust the fitness availability over a season for him to operate that way. And I think he's brilliant at left center back. I think that's where he ends up ultimately. And so yeah, I think that's a hole. And then if I'm looking beyond, I think it's not a hole right now, but I do look at some of our players after injury. One thing I want to look at for the next 6 months, by the way, is let's double check and see who kind of returns without their injuries. Guys, we've got a lot of players that are coming back from big injuries. Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, Kai Havertz, Martinelli had his injury, Ben White, Tommy is gone. We've replaced it with Mascara. But who am I missing, chat? Like we have had major injuries of over 2 months for a lot of our starters. So when I'm having a look at it, I need to see how these next 6 months react in terms of having these guys come back. I don't think it's a guarantee that everybody is going to be magically pilled fine. And so I really need to have a look. I mean, Jesus, sorry, like that's another one. So yeah, I do feel we will have to have a look at it and see how these guys return. And that's why I'm happy that we've done the amount of business we've done, because to be fair, we've protected those guys, right? Like the Madueke, their insurance on Bukayo Saka. You look at Mascara, he's insurance on Saliba. You look at Norgard with Zubamendi, it's insurance on Declan Rice not being spread too thin. We have absolutely protected our superstars, which is not something that Arsenal have done really in years. We do not protect our superstars. We like to rinse them with soap and make sure that they play every possible minute. So yeah, that is definitely something that I'm happy about with the window. This is from Gunner Forever. Thank you so much for the super chat. I'm not sure whether we'll sign Rodrigo or Eze to challenge Martinelli on the left, but we definitely missed a golden opportunity to sign Kvaratskhelia in January. He would have been a beast in this team. I find it difficult to talk about Kvaratskhelia because I feel like that was one that a deal was already pre-agreed for quite a while, if I'm really being honest. But to be honest, if you want a Kvaratskhelia, you're looking more at Eberechi Eze than you are at Rodrigo in terms of your ideas there. And I think that when you have like a winger depth and you're looking for different profiles, I think it makes sense, especially when Trossard is kind of your most sellable forward asset at this current moment, that you're looking to recruit somebody with a little bit more creative input. And of course, somebody that I think is, prime age and ready to impact now, which both of these two are. But, you're looking at two types of profiles where Rodrigo would stress Martinelli a bit more and Eze stresses Trossard more. And so I think makes a little bit more sense to me. So I don't know if Kvaratskhelia was something that, I feel that Arsenal would have been able to complete just by virtue of the value and what they were able to do. So, but if you'd like that, I think you'd like Eze. So, guys, by the way, thank you so much. There's like almost 630 of you guys. Please make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you really like it, of course, I'm going to plug one more time the Patreon down below that you can access with a 7-day free trial. So really appreciate if you guys would like to do that. I'm probably going to be going for like another 5 minutes if you guys want. So maybe get those last minute questions in. And yeah, thank you so much again for all of your help and your viewership. This is from Sam T. Hot take. A Rodrigo signing would have been more important than a Sesko Gyökeres signing. The striker issue feels more overblown and feel like he fixes more issues within the squad, facing low blocks, 1v1, and etc. I don't know if I would say... Okay, it's tough. For me, I just feel like you need to win now forwards. I didn't necessarily think that it had to be in a particular position. You guys know me. I'm open to any kind of forward combination. So for me, it's more about recruiting like talent that you believe in. I did feel that one thing I did want is somebody with a little bit more box efficiency. I did want somebody that was brilliant in the transition in terms of their decision making. and making sure that we could become more inevitable in transition. So those are the things I would probably look at a little bit more. But I do kind of agree that I feel that the left wing personally is, a position that needed a lot more of a visible upgrade. I think that, Kai Havertz being injured and Marino there, we did see other people at least put output in that position. But if we were going to be honest and fair, I would say the left wing and potentially Martin Odegaard as underperforming starting 11 changes currently. There was others too, like I don't think it's just them two, but I think those were probably the biggest drop off that we were expecting within the 11. So when you have a look at who and what could solve some of those things, I do agree that Rodrigo and Eze help this squad quite a bit. But I don't know if it's more important than Sesko or Gyökeres. I thought that two forward signings that upgrade the starting 11 were undoubtedly major issues within the team. So I think they're almost equally as important as each other, personally, but it didn't have to be striker. I wasn't insistent on the particular position. I did think we needed two, though. One, what wouldn't have been enough. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion on that. But Sam, thank you so much for the super chat. That was really generous of you. Thank you. So yeah, guys, I did want to go for a couple minutes more, so maybe I could take like one or two more questions at the end here. So I'll answer this from the physics frontier. If we do get Eze to play on the left, who do we see holding the width? Would Miles overlap, or would Gyökeres cheat to the left? First off, Gyökeres would work brilliantly in terms of cheating to the left. I think he does that with any left wing, by the way. Like, that's not just an Eze thing. I just think that it would work brilliant because, I mean, naturally Gyökeres is one who likes to chase the channels and likes to operate there. And I mean, Eze could just push inside and he could cheat, much more centrally, even off to Saka's side with something like that. So that helps. I do think that, Calafiori is going to offer a little bit more of an outside dynamic overlap, a little bit more. And I think that we're going to see Miles a little bit more in midfield. I maintain that. And I mean, he has a potential to go out wide. It's just when you start talking about Eze and even Rodrigo, guys, by the way, like we're talking about, it's not just operating wide. That's one thing, but it's having the ability to create this dynamism out wide. That's what's really important, right? Like, it's not just standing in the position to be touchline. You need to be a threat from those positions. If all it is a placeholder, then you're going to see very similar frustrations to what we've seen with Martinelli. So from my perspective, we're going to see a lot more fluidity. Absolutely. So the fluidity is going to be there. But the main thing that we'll see, probably in my opinion, is a little bit more overlaps from Calafiori, a little bit more overlaps from Gyökeres. It'll have very similar impacts for kind of the Havertz. You know how Havertz likes to peel off to the right in place of Saka? I think Gyökeres can do that very well on the left. So we have two strikers that have a little bit of that cheat mentality to push our kind of our wingers inside. So yeah, I don't know if I see him holding width. He may start there, but ultimately between Eze and Rodrigo, you're looking at players that want to be inside. So I do think that that's going to be the main question. Which overlapping left back would you go for? the age-old question. I like Jarell Hato quite a bit. I think that that's a player that has incredible potential on the outside. I don't think he's perfect. And I actually don't know if I find somebody on the market who is perfect. From Strasbourg, I love Moreira, who's more of a left wing back. I think he's brilliant. Somebody who absolutely needs a lot of work defensively, but has incredible running power, incredible forward thrust. And I think he could be a project player that I think is kind of undervalued in a sense. So that's like an alternative that I would look. There was a new left back that was just signed by West Ham, Diouf, who I thought was interesting. So I will be looking at that signing at West Ham very intently. He was actually somebody I was looking at, and then boom, West Ham signed him. So that was kind of an option. But, I do really push back on this, and I'd encourage everybody to have a look at the scouted that we did, because this idea that Hato isn't an overlapping left back, I really push back on. He has incredible running power, and this idea that he can't offer width on the outside is something I just completely disagree with. I think people are a little bit more looking at what he did the year before as opposed to what he's currently been asked to do, and also his traits. I mean, I don't agree with some of the shouts that I saw on the timeline that Hato is Nuno Mendes. I don't think he's got that power from a standstill that those Alphonso Davies and those kind of Nuno Mendes have, but the running power over larger distances and his ability to have repeat sprints and his quality in delivering the crosses is incredible. His quality in the final third is unreal. And so I do believe that Hato absolutely has that flexibility. I don't agree personally that he isn't an overlapping left back. But yeah, I think that's a signing that I probably need to have a little bit more look at, because I think Moreira is another option that I've talked about. The signing from West Ham is brilliant. So I may want to have a look there, but he's already moved. So left back is something I'm actively looking for. And so I will spend the next 6 months trying to find somebody that I really, really do enjoy. So guys, thank you so much for your questions. I'm sorry if we weren't able to get to all of them, but I really appreciate all the support, guys. Seriously, it has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for supporting me on one of my lives. I know I get really nervous on these, but I really do appreciate it. And your support is always amazing. I'll definitely point you guys down to some of the content that we've got coming up. I mean, we've got an Eze Scouted that is going to be released, so make sure you guys look out for that. We have the main pod, of course, a youth pod that we're recording on Monday. And guys, we will be back for the instant reactions that you guys all know and love after AC Milan. So guys, the content machine, she just keeps on rolling, and we are here to take it up a notch for you guys on the Cannon Podcast. So guys, thank you so much. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for all your support. Much love. And guys, thanks for everything, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Electrifying. Inspiration.